On a quiet summer afternoon beneath the golden rays of a setting sun, a small frail puppy lay abandoned on the side of a dusty road. His thin frame trembled with weakness, and his soft whimpers were barely audible over the rustling of nearby trees. Passers-by ignored him, dismissing him as just another stray too far gone to save. Yet fate had a different plan. When a kind-hearted woman named Grace spotted him, she saw not just a helpless animal, but a spark of potential, a life worth fighting for. What she didn't know was that this tinny creature would one day become a hero. Grace was no stranger to rescuing animals, but there was something different about this puppy. His eyes, though clouded with exhaustion, held a flicker of resilience. She wrapped him in a soft blanket and rushed him to the nearest veterinarian, praying she wasn't too late. The vet shook his head, warning that the odds were against him, but Grace refused to give up. She named him Chance, a fitting name for the second opportunity. She was determined to give him. For weeks, Grace nursed Chance back to health in her small but cozy home. Every meal was carefully prepared, everyone delicately treated. Slowly but surely, the puppy began to heal. His once lifeless eyes brightened, his tail wagged tentatively, and his spirit seemed to awaken. Grace could hardly believe the transformation taking place. Before her eyes, as Chance grew stronger, he also grew more curious and alert. It wasn't long before Grace noticed his keen instincts. She would bark at unusual sounds, watch her intently as she moved around the house, and even try to help when she misplaced items. It became clear that Chance wasn't just any dog, he was special. Grace began to wonder if there was a way to channel his unique energy and intelligence. One fateful day, as Grace walked Chance through the neighborhood, they stumbled upon a community event showcasing police canine demonstrations. Grace watched in awe as the dogs showcased their loyalty, bravery, and skills. A wild idea began to form in her mind. Could Chance, the puppy Noon wanted, have what it takes to become a hero? To Chan's journey from a weak abandoned puppy to a hopeful candidate for greatness was far from easy. Great follow her instinct and explore whether Chance's new phone, Jans, could lead him toward something extraordinary. The idea of training him as a police dog wasn't just ambitious. It was nearly impossible. Chance had no pedigree, official training background, and bore the scars of neglect. But Grace believed in him, and that belief would become the cornerstone of their shared journey. Grace began by researching local training programs and eventually found a police academy that accepted volunteers for basic obedience classes. Most participants brought purebred German Shepherds or Belgian Malinois, the traditional police dog breeds. When Grace walked in with Chance's small, wiry dog with floppy ears and a scrappy demeanor, she was met with skeptical looks and muffled chuckles. "Are you sure this is the right place?" one trainer asked with a raised brow. Grace smiled but didn't flinch. "He may not look like much, but he's got." The first few weeks of training were grueling. The other dogs performed commands flawlessly, their movements sharp and precise. Chance, however, struggled to keep up. He would sit when he should stand, bark at distractions, and sometimes trip over his own. Pause. Grace's heart sank as trainers whispered among themselves, clearly doubting Chance's potential. But every time he stumbled, Chance would get back up. He refused to quit, and Grace's awe something remarkable in his perseverance as she began spending hours outside the formal classes, practicing with him in their backyard using simple positive reinforcement techniques. She taught Chance the basics of obedience. Day by day, his confidence grew. He learned to sit and stay and follow Grace's commands with growing accuracy. One day during a routine training session at the academy, Chance surprised everyone. The task was a scent detection exercise, a challenging test requiring dogs to locate a hidden object based on scent. While the other dogs hesitated, Chance bounded, edged forward with determination, sniffing the air. Within moments, he had found the hidden article and sat proudly beside it, wagging his tail. The trainers exchanged astonished looks. "Well, I'll be one," muttered. "This little guy has a nose for it." Encouraged by this breakthrough, Grace continued to push Chance's limits. She practiced tirelessly, learning to jump over obstacles, retrieve objects to ease, and respond to complex commands. What Chance lacked in physical stature, he made up for in sheer determination and loyalty. Grace of 10 wondered if his struggles as a puppy had given him an unbreakable spirit that refused to back down. No matter the odds. Outside of training, their bond deepened. Grace saw Chance not just as a trainee, but as a companion who had become an integral part of her life. Chance in turn never left their side. He would follow her from room to room, sensing her moods and offering comfort during tough days. So it was as though he understood that saved his life, and he was determined to repay her kindness in every way he could. However, their journey wasn't without challenges. Chan's small size and unconventional appearance continued to draw criticism. During an evaluation, one senior officer coughed. "He doesn't look like much of a police dog. Are you sure he's cut out for this?" Grace squared her shoulders. "She may not look the part, but he's got what it takes. Just watch." The officer shrugged, clearly unconvinced, but Grace was deterred. She knew that Chance would prove his worth not just to the skeptics, but to anyone who had ever doubted the power of perseverance and second chances. Their persistence paid off. When Chance was invited to participate in an advanced training session with the police academy's elite team, the stakes were higher and the tests more rigorous, but Grace believed he was ready. The trainers created simulated scenarios, from track down hidden objects in dense brush to chasing after decoys. Pointless criminals. Chance tackled each challenge with focus and determination, impressing the most skeptical instructors. One day, during a high-pressure simulation, Chance's instincts shone through. A decoy had escaped into a wooded area, and the dogs were tasked with locating them while the other trainees struggled to pick up the trail. Chance seemed to lock onto the scent immediately, with Grace close behind. He darted through the underbrush, his nose working overtime. Within minutes, she found the decoy and barked loudly to alert Grace. The head trainer clapped slowly, a smile spreading across his face. "Looks like your little muth has the makings of a hero." After all, as Grace knelt beside him, scratching behind his ears, she couldn't help but beam with pride. Chagged his tail furiously, his eyes shining with joy for the first time. It felt like their hard work was truly paying off. Chance's entry into the advanced training program marked a turning point in his journey, but the road ahead was anything but smooth. As the stakes grew higher, so did the expectations, and Grace found herself facing a new wave of doubts and challenges. The other trainees were elite dogs, strong, fast, and bred for this exact purpose. Their handlers often cast sidelong glances at Chance, muttering things like, "He's an ISIS story, but this isn't a charity program," or "that much better off chasing squirrels than suspects." Grace brushed off the comments, focusing instead on Chance's progress, but she couldn't ignore the mounting pressure. The advanced sessions tested not only a dog's abilities, but also the bond between handler and kin. Grace had faith in Chance, but she knew they couldn't afford any mistakes. One particular test loomed over the mock pursuit in an urban environment. The task was to track a suspect through a maze of obstacles, including high fences, tight alleyways, and distractions like loud noises and scattered food. Grace watched as the larger dogs leaped effortlessly over barriers and maintained their focus despite the chaos. Her heart sank as she imagined Chance's struggling to keep up on the day of the test. The trainers announced that it would be timed. Grace could feel the tension in the air. A handlers prepped their dogs, adjusting harnesses and offering last-minute encouragement. She knelt beside Chance, rubbing his ears and whispering, "You've got this, buddy, just do your best." When their turn, Grace felt every eye in the room on the mask. The timer started. Chance's sprang into action. He darted down the alleyway, his nose to the ground, expertly following the scent trail. Grace could barely keep up, shelled her through a series of sharp turns and narrow passages. The first major obstacle was a tall fence. Grace's stomach tightened as Chance approached it, while the other dogs had scaled it with ease. Chance hesitated, eyeing the height nervously. "Oh, you can do it, Chance," Grace urged, her voice steady despite her chart with a determined bark. Chance leaped. This paws scrabbled against the wood, and for a moment it seemed he wouldn't make it. But then, with one final push, he hauled himself over. The small crowd watching let out a collective gasp, followed by murmurs of surprise. Grace cheered under her breath as Chance landed on the other side, his tail wagging triumphantly. The course grew more challenging as they progressed. Distractions were everywhere. A loud car horn blared, a plate of food lay temptingly in their path, and barking dogs could be heard in the distance, but Chance stayed laser-focused, his nose guiding him like a compass. By the time they reached the final stretch, Grace was breathless but exhilarated. The final obstacle was a decoy suspect hiding behind a stack of barrels. As Chance rounded the corner, he froze, his ears pricked and his body tense. Grace gave him the signal, and he barked sharply, alerting her to the suspect's location. The trainers blew the whistle, marking the end of the test. There was a beat of silence before the head trainer stepped forward, his clipboard in hand. Time 3 minutes 45 seconds. She announced, "One of the fastest runs today." The crowd erupted in applause. Grace felt a wave of relief and pride as she knelt to hug Chance. Licked her face enthusiastically. "You did it, buddy," she whispered. "You really did it." Despite their success, no everyone was convinced. During a debriefing session, senior officer voiced his doubts. "It's impressive, sure, but can he handle the pressure of aerial mission? It's one thing to succeed in a controlled environment, but out in the field, it's a different story." Grace squared her shoulders. "She's ready. He's proven himself time and time again." The officer arched a brow. "We'll see." The following weeks brought more rigorous tests and training sessions. Grace pushed Chance harder than ever, balancing encouragement with discipline. They practiced tracking in dense forests, navigating through water, and even responding to simulated emergencies. Each challenge brought new hurdles, but Chance met them all with determination. One evening, as they returned home from a particularly grueling session, Grace noticed something unusual. Chance, who was usually full of energy, seemed subdued. He lagged behind on their walk, his steps slower than usual. Concerned, Grace knelt beside him, checking for injuries. "Are you okay, boy?" she asked, stroking his fur. Chance licked her hand but didn't wag his tail. Grace decided to take him to the vet the next morning after a thorough examination. The vet concluded that Chance was physically fine, but likely exhausted from the intense training. Hun's been through a lot, the vet said gently. Give him some time to rest. Even heroes need a break. Taking the advice to heart, Grace adjusted their routine, incorporating more downtime and play into their schedules. She realized that while it was important to push Chance to reach his potential, it was equally important to let them enjoy being a dog. During one of their lighter days, Grace took Chance to a nearby park. As she chased a frisbee and rolled in the grass, she was reminded of the scrappy, scared puppy she had found months ago. Seeing him, now a strong, confident dog with a purpose, filled her with gratitude and pride. Little did Grace know their biggest test was just around the corner. As Grace and Chance approached the final phase of the training program, their bond had never been stronger. They were a team, and everyone in the department was beginning to take a notice. Even those who had doubted Chance's abilities were starting to acknowledge his potential. But just when it seemed like things were finally falling into place, a situation arose that would test them like never before. It started with a late-night phone call. Grace was at home winding down after a long day when her phone buzzed on the counter. The voice on the other end was her commanding officer. "Grace, we've got an urgent situation," he said, his tone serious. "A child has gone missing in the forest near Ridgewood Park. We need every available handler and dog on site immediately." Grace's heart skipped a beat. Ridgewood Park was vast and dense, known for its twisting trails and thick underbrush. A search and rescue mission there would be challenging even under ideal conditions. And the clock ticking. Without hesitation, she grabbed Chance's gear and headed out. When they arrived at the park, the scene was chaotic. Flashlights cut through the darkness. A search teams coordinated their efforts. The child, a 7-year-old boy named Ben, had been playing near the edge of the woods when he wandered off. His parents were distraught, their voices trembling as they answered questions from the officers. Grace knelt beside, adjusting his harness and stroking his fur. "This is it, buddy," she whispered. "This is what we've been training for. We're going to find him." The head of the search team approached, his expression grim. "The kid's been missing for over 3 hours. Temperatures are dropping fast, and we're worried about hypothermia. Can your dog handle this?" Grace met this gaze with unwavering confidence. "Chance is ready. We'll find him." The team assigned Grace and Chance to a specific sector of the forest, an area known for its steep inclines and narrow paths. As they entered the woods, the sounds of the search party faded, replaced by the eerie stillness of the night. Grace switched on her flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness, and gave Chance the command to start tracking. Chance lowered his nose to the ground, sniffing intently as she moved forward. Grace followed close behind, her senses on high alert. The forest was disorienting, with shadows dancing between the trees and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. But Chance was focused, his tail wagging slightly as she picked up the scent trail. They moved deeper into the woods, navigating through thick underbrush and crossing a shallow stream. Grace could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on her. Every minute that passed without finding Ben felt like an eternity. Suddenly Chance froze up, and his body tense. He let out a low bark, his eyes fixed on a thicket of bushes. Up ahead, Grace's pulse quickened as she approached, crouching down to peer through the branches. At first she saw nothing, but then her flashlight caught a flash of movement, a small trembling figure huddled beneath the bushes. "Ben," Grace called out gently. The boy looked up, his face pale and tear-streaked. He didn't say a word, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. Grace dropped to her knees, her voice off-tan, reassuring. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here to help. This is Chance. He's a good dog, and he's going to keep you safe." Chance moved forward, cautiously, his tail wagging. As she sniffed at Bent, the boy hesitated for a moment before reaching out to touch the dog's head. Chance licked his hand, and a small tentative smile crossed Ben's face. Grace quickly assessed the situation. Ben's clothes were damp, and he was shivering uncontrollably. They needed to get them back to safety as soon as possible. She pulled off her jacket, wrapping it around him, and activated her radio to alert the team. "They found him," she said, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "We're in Sector 4 near the stream. He's cold but responsive, sending our location." They waited for the rescue team to arrive. Grace sat beside Ben, keeping him close to her for warmth. Chance lay at the boy's feet, this presence calm and reassuring. Grace couldn't help but marvel at how far Chance had come, from a scared, abandoned puppy to a dog capable of saving a life. When the rescue team finally reached them, Ben's parents were among them. The moment they saw their son, they broke into tears, rushing forward to embrace him. Grace stepped back, giving them space as the weight of the moment sank in. One of the officers clapped her on the shoulder. "You and your dog did good tonight," they said with an odd real good as Grace watched Chance wag his tail and accept pats from the team. She felt as well of pride, but she also knew this was just the beginning. Tonight had proven that Chance had what it took to be a hero. Viewed it all cement the expectations on him and her would only grow from here. Little did they know this was only the first of many moments that would define their legacy. The rescue operation at Ridgewood Park became the talk of the department. Chance's extraordinary performance was hailed as a testament to his abilities and Grace's unwavering faith in him. But with the praise came a tidal wave of attention, both welcome and challenging. The day after the mission, Grace arrived at the station to find her colleagues buzzing with excitement. "There's the Hiruni," officer called out as she walked in, with Chance trotting PR Lee beside her. Another offered her a cup of coffee, grinning. "You've got to tell us how you trained this guy to fearless." Grace chuckled, scratching Chance behind the ears. "It's not about training fearlessness. It's about trust. The knows I've got this back, and I know he's got mine." Viewed amidst the camaraderie and note, everyone was impressed. Officer Darren, a veteran handler known for his skepticism, leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. "One successful rescued doesn't make a hero," he muttered loud enough for Grace to hear. "Let's see how them handle serial crisis." Grace bit back, our tort focusing instead on Chance, who seemed oblivious to the tensions. She reminded herself that their bond was stronger than anyone's doubts. Still, Darren's words lingered in her mind, fueling a determination to prove that their success wasn't a fluke. Over the next few weeks, the demands on Grace and Chance escalated. Their story had spread beyond the department, catching the attention of local media. Reporters reached out, eager to cover the tale of the rescue dog who had overcome the odds. Grace was hesitant at first, worried about the spotlight affecting Chance's training, but her commanding officer encouraged her to share their journey. "People need stories like this," he said. "It's not just about the dog, it's about what you've both accomplished." Reluctantly, Grace agreed to an interview. The local news team visited the station, filming shots of Chance weaving through an obstacle course and demonstrating his tracking skills. During the interview, Grace spoke about their bond, the challenges they had overcome, and the importance of giving second chance not just to dogs, but to anyone who might be underestimated. The segment aired a week later, drawing widespread attention. Donations poured into the department's canine unit, with notes from viewers. Inspired by Chance's story, some shared their own tales of resilience, while others expressed interest in adopting rescue animals. Despite the positive response, the newfound fame brought challenges. Grace noticed that Chance was becoming more reactive during training sessions, distracted by the constant influx of visitors wanting to meet them. It was clear that the increased attention was taking a toll on him. One afternoon during a practice drill, Chance hesitated at a crucial moment, causing them to fail the exercise. Grace felt a pang of frustration, but she quickly pushed it aside. Kneeling beside him, she cued his face in her hands. "It's okay, buddy. We're in this together." Late evening, Grace decided to take a step back. She realized they both needed a break from the relentless schedule. She loaded Chance into her truck and drove to the countryside, to a quiet trail they used to frequent before his training began. As they walked under the canopy of trees, Grace let Chance roam freely, his tail wagging as she explored the familiar sense. As she watched him roll in the grass and chase after birds, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in weeks. Sitting on a fallen log, Grace reflected on their journey. The pressure to succeed, the doubts from others, and even her own insecurities had been weighing her down, but seeing Chance happy and carefree reminded her of why she had taken this path. In the first place, it's not about proving anyone wrong, she said aloud, more to herself than to Chance. It's about showing what's possible when you believe in someone, even when no one else does. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the forest. Grace called Chance back to her side. He trotted over his stong, lulling happily, and leaned against her leg, ready to keep going. Shesk, stroking his fur, his enthusiastic bark was all the answer she needed. The next day, Grace returned to the station with a renewed sense of purpose as she spoke to her commanding officer about setting boundaries to protect Chance from being overwhelmed by the constant attention. The department agreed to limit visitors and focus on his training. Meanwhile, Officer Darren's skepticism persisted. "A little. Our NR isn't gonna make him aerial police dog here," marked during a meeting. "Let's see how he handles the next big mission." Grace didn't rise to the bait, but inside she resolved to let Chance's actions speak louder than words. She doubled down on their training, working with him to refine his skills and build his confidence. They tackled advanced obstacle courses, practiced in high pressure of simulations, and event-trained in unfamiliar environments taught prepare for anything they might face in the field. As the weeks went by, Grace noticed a change in Chance. His hesitation faded, replaced by a newfound focus and determination. It was as if he understood the stakes and was rising to meet them, man, with each small victory. Grace felt their own confidence grow. Their bond was stronger than ever, and Grace knew they were ready for whatever came next. Little did she know their greatest challenge was just around the corner. One brisk autumn morning, Grace and Chance were called into the chief's office for a briefing. A high-priority case had emerged. A string of burglaries had left the community shaken, and the suspects were believed to be operating out of an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The police needed to act swiftly, but there was a catch. The area was riddled with narrow passageways, hidden traps, and dangerous conditions. It was a job tailor-made for the canine unity. Out we're up, the chief said, handing Grace the file. Chance will need to sniff out the suspects, but be cautious. This operation has more risks than usual. Grace nodded, feeling a mix of pride and anxiety. She had faith in Chance, but she knew the stakes were high. As she scanned the file here, Yez landed on a note from Officer Darren scribbled in the margins. "Don't screw this up." She crumpled the note and shoved it into her pocket, determined not to let his doubts cloud her focus. That afternoon, Grace prepared Chance for the mission. She reviewed the layout of the warehouse, identifying potential hazards and escape routes. Chances seemed to sense the gravity of the situation, staying unusually calm. He double-checked his harness. "You're ready, buddy," she said, kneeling to look him in the eyes. "We've trained for moments like this." When they arrived at the warehouse, the scene was chaotic. Squad cars surrounded the area. Officers moved into position, and tension hung heavy in the air. Darren approached with a clipboard, his expression unreadable. "Don't let your dog get distracted," he said curtly before walking off. Grace ignored him, focusing instead on Chance. As he knelt down and whispered, "Stay close, follow my lead, and we'll get through this." The operation began. Grace and Chance entered the dimly lit warehouse, their movements deliberate and cautious. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and rust, and every creak of the floorboards sent shivers down Grace's spine. She held her flashlight, steady, watching as Chance sniffed the ground, his ears perked for any sound. As they moved deeper into the warehouse, Chance suddenly froze, his body tense. Grace followed his gaze to a stack of crates in the corner. Chance let out a low growl, signaling the presence of someone nearby. "Good boy," Grace whispered, signaling for backup. A team of officers quietly entered the space, guns drawn as Grace gave the signal for Chance to advance. Precision, he circled the crates, his nose working overtime. Suddenly, a suspect bolted from behind the stacks, printing toward the exit. "Go, Chance," Grace commanded. In a blur of movement, Chance lunged forward, cutting off the suspect's escape. His bark echoed through the warehouse. The suspect froze, raising his hands. Since surrender, the officers moved in to make the arrest, but the tension was far from over. A second, suspect emerged from the shadows. This one-armed Madan visibly agitated. Grace's heart raced as she positioned herself between the suspect and Chance. "Drop the weapon," she shouted, her voice firm for a moment. The suspect hesitated, his gaze darting between Grace and the officers. Closing in the blink of an eye, Chance moved to Grace's side, his stance protective and unyielding. It was as if he understood the danger and was prepared to act if needed. The stand offended when the suspect finally dropped the weapon, his shoulders slumping in defeat. As she was taken into custody, Grace let out a breath she hadn't realized. She knelt beside Chance, her hands trembling as she stroked his fury. "You did it, buddy," she murmured. "Are you kept us safe back at the station?" Grace and Chance were met with a mix of applause and disbelief. Darren, for once, had no snide remarks. Instead, he simply nodded, a grudging acknowledgement of their success. But the victory was bittersweet that night. As Grace tended to Chance, his paws, she noticed a deep cut on his. He winced as she cleaned the wound, and guilt, nor did her had she pushed him too hard. Was the risk worth their reward? The incident forced Grace to evaluate their approach. While Chance had proven himself time and again, she knew he wasn't invincible. She scheduled a visit to the vet, who confirmed that the injury wasn't severe, but recommended a week of rest during their downtime. Grace took the opportunity to reflect on their journey. She realized that their bond had grown stronger, not because of their successes, but because of how they had faced challenges together. Chance had taught the resilience, trust, and the importance of second chances. As the week went on, Grace began to notice something remarkable about Chance. Despite his injury, he seemed eager to return to work, his tail wagging every time she picked up his harness. It was a testament to his unwavering spirit, a reminder of why she had chosen him in the first place. By the time Chance was fully healed, Grace felt more prepared than ever. She had learned to balance ambition with care, pushing him just not to grow without risk in his well-being. Together, they were ready to tackle whatever came next. A few weeks later, Grace and Chance were called to another scene, but this one struck a deep personal chord. A young girl named Lily had gone missing in the dense woods and the outskirts of town. She had been playing near her home when she wandered off, and as night fell, temperatures dropped dangerously low. The entire community was sunged, and Grace could feel the weight of their expectations when she arrived at the command post set up near the forest's edges. She found Lily's distraught parents huddled together, their eyes red from crying. "Please," the mother begged, clutching Grace's arm. "Find hers. She's only 7. Grace nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "We'll do everything we can." The search party had already begun scouring the forest, but the area was vast and time was running out. Grace knew that Chance's tracking skills could make the difference, but the pressure to succeed was immense as she crouched beside him, holding out a small sweater that belonged to Lily. "Okay, Chance," she said softly. "This is Lily." Fiend her boy Chance's the sweater intently, his nose twitching as she picked up the scent with a determined bark. He began leading Grace into the woods, his tail wagging in focus. Grace followed closely, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. As the sounds of the forest surrounded the mass, they ventured deeper. The terrain became more challenging. Fallen branches and uneven ground slowed their progress, and Grace could feel the chill seeping through her jacket. Chance, however, seemed unfazed, his determination unwavering. They passed search teams calling out Lily's name, but Chance ignored them, his nose to the ground. After what felt like she suddenly stopped, his ears perking up. Hella tout, a series of short barks, signaling that he had found something. Grace's heart leaped as she hurried to his side. In the dim light, she spotted a small pink shoe wedged under a bush. It was muddy and slightly torn, but it was unmistakably Lily's. Grace radioed the find to the command post, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "She's close," Grace assured Chance. "Good boy, let's keep going." Chance resumed, tracking his movements, quick and purposeful. Grace's flashlight flared, casting eerie shadows among the trees. Every sound seemed amplified, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the distant hoot of an owl, the wind rustling through the branches, but Grace's focus remained on Chance, trusting him to lead the way. Suddenly he stopped again, his body tense. He growled low in his throat, a sound that sent a shiver down Grace's spine. She scanned the area, her flashlight revealing a steep embankment ahead. At the bottom, a faint whimpering sound reached her ears. "Lily," Grace called out, her voice firm but gentle. "It's Officer Grace. I'm here to help." The whimpering grew louder, and Grace carefully made her way down the slope, gripping onto branches for support. Chance followed closely, his presence a constant reassurance. As they neared the bottom, Grace's flashlight illuminated a small figure curled up against a tree rung. It was Lily. She was shivering, her face pale and streaked with tears, but she was alive. Grace knelt beside her, wrapping her in the emergency blanket she had brought. "So you're safe now," she said softly. "We're going to get you home." Chance sat beside Lily, his warm presence calming her. As she clung to Grace, the little girl looked at the doubtful eyes. "She found me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The puppy found me." Grace smiled, her heart swelling with pride and relief. "That's Chance. He's very brave, just like you." Getting back up the embankment was a challenge. Grace carried Lily, her arms straining as she climbed, while Chance trotted ahead, occasionally pausing to ensure they were following. By the time they reached the search teams, Grace's legs were shaking, but she didn't care. Lily was safe, and that was all that mattered. The moment Lily was reunited with her parents, son, Grace would never forget. Their mother sobbed as she hugged her daughter tightly, while her father shook Grace's hand, his voice choked with emotion. "Thank you," he said. "Are you saved her?" "Chance saved her," Grace corrected, glancing at the dog. His tail wagged happily as Lily knelt to hug him, her small arms wrapping around his neck. It was a scene that left evident he seasoned officers misty-eyed that night back at home. Grace reflected on the day's events. She stroked Chance's furiously their feet, his eyes half closed in contentment. "You're amazing. You know that," she said softly. "You gave that family their little girl back." Chance let out a soft huff, acknowledging her words before resting his head on her lap. In that moment, Grace realized that their partnership wasn't just about the work they did. It was about the lives they touched. The hope they brought and the unbreakable bond they shared. Life had settled into a comforting rhythm after the rescue of Lily. Grace and Chance were becoming local heroes, and their bond grew stronger with each passing day. But with recognition came added responsibilities and challenges, especially as news of Chance's extraordinary abilities began spreading beyond their small town. One crisp autumn morning, Grace received an unexpected call from the precinct's chief officer, Daniel. His voice was calm, but carried an undertone of urgency. "Grace, we've got a situation, and I need you and Chance on this one." Has said, "A man went hiking in the nearby national park and hasn't returned. His wife reported him missing early this morning." Grace felt their stump tighten. The national park was sprawling, filled with dense forests, steep cliffs, and treacherous terrain. "Our rescue mission there wouldn't be easy." "We're on it," she said, her voice steady. "Send method details." When Chance arrived at the ranger station, the missing Man's family was waiting his wife. Maria clutched a small photo of her husband, tears streaming down her face. Please, she begged, he went out yesterday morning and said he'd be back by evening. He never stays out this long, something's wrong. Grace nodded, her resolve hardening. We find him, she promised. Do you have anything of his, something with his scent? Mariah handed over a wool scarf, its edges frayed from use. This was his favorite, he wore it all the time. Chance sniffed the scarf, his nose twitching as she familiarized himself with the scent. Grace gave him area-assuring patal right. Buddy Litton finned him. The search party consisted of park rangers, police officers, and a few volunteers. But Grace and Chance took a different route. Following the direction the man was last seen heading, the forest was eerily quiet save for the crunch of leaves underfoot and the occasional rustle of branches in the wind was crisp, carrying the earthy scent of moss and decaying foliage. Hours passed, and the tension grew. Chance led them deeper into the woods, his nose working tirelessly. Grace's focus was unwavering, but the vastness of the forest was daunting. Every snap of wig or distant call of a bird heightened her alertness. Just as doubt began to creep in, Chance froze, his ears perked up, and he let out a low, sharp bark. Grace followed his gaze and spotted a hicking boot, partially covered by leaves. Her heart raced as she rushed forward. It was the man's boot. Good boy, Chance, as she murmured, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. She radioed their location to the command center before urging Chance to continue tracking the trail. Led them to a narrow ravine. Grace peered over the edge and spotted a figure laying at the bottom, partially obscured by rocks and branches. Her stomach sank. The man wasn't moving. "Sir, can you hear me?" she called out, her voice echoing in the ravine. There was no response. Grace turned to Chance, and who whined softly, sensing the gravity of the situation. With her radio in hand, Grace relayed their position and requested immediate backup. While waiting, she assessed the situation. The descent was steep and risky, but she couldn't just stand by. She secured a rope to a nearby tree and began making her way down carefully, Chance staying close by, his eyes fixed on her every move. When she reached them, she was relieved to find that he was breathing, though barely. His leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, likely broken, and his clothes were damp from the cold. Grace checked his pulse and spoke softly, trying to rouse him. "You're going to be okay, help." I saw the way the man's eyes fluttering open. "My wife," he murmured, "she's safe." Grace assured him, "We're going to get you back to her." As backup arrived, ropes and stretchers were lowered into the ravine with the help of the rescue team. Grace and the man were brought to safety. Chance, ever vigilant, stayed by the man, his presence a calming force amid the chaos at the ranger station. Maria ran to her husband, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she sobbed, holding him tightly. She turned to Grace and Chance, her gratitude spilling over. "You saved him." "Don't know how to thank you." Grace smiled, her hand resting on Chance's head. "What we did that evening," as Grace sat on her porch with Chance, she reflected on the day. The stakes had been higher, the risks greater, but they had succeeded. Chance lay beside her, his eyes bright and alert despite the day's exertion. "You're incredible." "You know that," Grace's head scratching behind his ears. "I don't know how I ever got by without you." Chance let out a contented sigh, his tail thumping lightly against the wooden floor. In that moment, Grace realized that their work wasn't just about saving lives. It was about restoring hope, one rescue at a time. In the weeks following the dramatic rescue in the ravine, Grace and Chance's reputation grew. Even further, articles in local papers called Chance the Miracle Dog, and social media posts about his heroic deeds gained traction. It wasn't long before Grace was approached with an intriguing offer one morning. As she sipped her coffee at the precinct, Chief Daniels walked into her office holding a letter. His expression was a mix of pride and curiosity. "Grace, you've got mail from the state police," he said, handing her the envelope. "Looks like they've taken notice of you." In Chance, Grace opened the letter. "Here," scanning the formal invitation inside. It was an offer to join a specialized canine training program with the state police, a chance to expand Chance's skills and participate in statewide search and rescue missions. "This is huge," Daniel said, leaning on the edge of her desk. "Opportunities like this don't come around often." Grace's mind raced. The idea of taking Chance's training to the next level was exciting, but it also meant stepping away from her small-town duties, at least temporarily. She glanced at Chance, who lay sprawled on the floor beside her, his head resting on his page's unwavering loyalty. An incredible instinct had already changed so many lives. Could they do even more on a larger scale? That evening, Grace called her sister Sarah for advice. Sarah had always been her sounding board, offering a level-headed perspective on big decisions. "I think it's an amazing opportunity," Sarah said after listening to Grace explain the offer. "But it sounds like you're hesitating." "Why?" Grace sighed, looking out the window at the twilight sky. "It's just our town needs us, Sarah, and Chance, he's already doing so much good. Here's our voices often. I get it, but think about how many more people you could. If you take this step, it's not about leaving the town behind. It's about expanding your impact." and you'll always have a place here. The words stuck with Grace lingering in her mind as she watched Chance play in the yard later that night. She had always believed in his potential, and now it seemed like the world was beginning to see it too. A few days later, Grace made her decision. She accepted the invitation to the K9 program, but arranged for a rotation that would allow her to remain involved in her town's emergencies. The compromise felt right. It honored her commitment to community while opening new doors for her and Chance. The training program began in earnest, pushing both Grace and Chance to their limits. They traveled to a state-of-the-art facility where K9 teams from across the state honed their skills. The rigorous sessions tested Chan's agility, endurance, and problem-solving abilities, while Grace learned advanced techniques to strengthen their partnership. On exercise involved navigating a simulated disaster site complete with collapsed buildings and artificial smoke. Chance excelled, his sharp senses guiding him through the maze of debris. To locate hidden victims, trainers marveled at his focus and determination. Of 10 commenting on the unique bond he shared with Grace. "You've got something special here," one trainer said during a break. "I've worked with dozens of K9 teams, but I've never seen a dog so attuned to his handler. He'd follow you to the ends of the earth." Grace smiled, ruffling Chance's ears. "She's my partner, my family, we trust each other completely." But the program wasn't without challenges. On one particularly grueling day, Chance seemed to falter during a scent tracking exercise. He hesitated, circling the same spot repeatedly, as if unsure of the direction. Grace felt their frustration mounting, but she took a deep breath and reminded herself of the patience that had brought them this far. "Take your time, buddy," she said softly, kneeling beside him. "We'll figure this out together." Chance looked at her, his amber eyes searching hers for reassurance with a renewed sense of purpose. Here, zoom tracking, this time successfully locating the target. Grace's heart swelled with pride. As the trainers applauded, "That's what separates good handlers from great ones." The lead trainer said afterward, "You didn't push him, you supported him. That's what builds trust." As the weeks went on, Grace and Chance continued to grow as a team. They became a source of inspiration for the other participants, many of whom sought Grace's advice on building stronger bonds. With their K9 partners in turn, Grace found herself learning from the diverse group of handlers, gaining insights that deepened her understanding of Chance's abilities. By the end of the program, Grace and Chance had not only exceeded expectations, but had also formed lasting connections with the other teams. Experience left Grace feeling more confident than ever in their mission to make a difference both at home and beyond. When they returned to their small town, the welcome was overwhelming. A crowd gathered at the precinct cheering as Grace and Chance stepped out of the patrol car. Children held handmade signs that read "Welcome Home, Heroes," and Chance wagged his tail, furiously basking in the attention. As Grace looked around at the familiar faces, she realized that her decision to embrace new opportunities hadn't distanced her from her community. It had brought them closer, and now with Chance by her side, she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the weeks turned into months, Grace and Chance's reputation as an extraordinary team continued to grow. Their recent success at the state K9 training program had elevated them to local legends, and the town reveled in their accomplishments. But with recognition came scrutiny, and not everyone viewed their bond as unbreakable. One afternoon, Grace received a troubling phone call from Chief Daniels. A group of skeptics, including a high-profile animal behaviorist named Dr. Marcus Lee, had questioned his transformation from a rejected puppy to a hero police dog was truly as remarkable as it seemed. The critics suggested that Chance's skills might be exaggerated, attributing his achievements more to luck than ability. They've organized a public demonstration, Daniels explained over the phone. "They want you and Chance to prove yourselves in front of a panel of experts. It's happening this Saturday." Grace's stomach tightened. The thought of putting Chance under such intense scrutiny unnerved her, but she couldn't let doubt overshadow everything they had built. She hung up the phone, turning to Chance, wholly curled at their feet. "We've faced worse, haven't we, buddy?" she said, stroking his head. "We show them what we're made of." Saturday arrived quickly, bringing a crowd of onlookers and a row of stern-faced judges to the town square. The event was designed to test Chance's abilities in real time, with each exercise aimed at challenging his obedience, agility, and intelligence. Grace could feel the weight of the town's expectations pressing down on her, but she reminded herself to trust it. In Chance, the first challenge was a simple obedience test. Grace issued commands, sit, stay, roll over, and Chance executed each one flawlessly. The crowd murmured in approval, but Lyle remained unimpressed, jotting notes on his clipboard without looking up. Next came the agility course. Chance darted through tunnels, leaped over hurdles, and navigated a precarious balance beam with precision, and Grace's performance was met with cheers. But again, the panel's reactions were muted. The final challenge was the most daunting, a scent tracking exercise designed to simulate a missing person scenario. The organizers had hidden a volunteer deep in a wooded area beyond the town square, leaving Chance solely on his instincts to fin them. Grace knelt beside Chance at the starting point, her hand resting gently on his back. "You've got this, boy, just like we've practiced," Chance's niffed. The ground his ears perking up as she caught the scent without hesitation. He took off weaving through the trees with Grace close behind. The crowd watched insolence, their anticipation palpable minutes past, each one stretching longer than the last. Grace could feel her heartbeat quicken as she followed Chance deeper into the woods. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Chance stopped abruptly, his nose pointing toward a cluster of bushes. He barked once, then twice, his tail wagging furiously. Grace pushed through the foliage to fin the volunteers sitting, unharmed, air-relieved smile on their face. Chance had done it again. As they returned to the square, the crowd erupted into applause. Grace beamed with pride, but her moment of triumph was short-lived. Dr. Lyle stepped forward, raising a hand to quiet the crowd. "Impressive," he said, his tone clipped, but it still questioned whether Chance's performance to today was indicative of his true abilities or merely the result of extensive training. Her dog's instincts are one thing, but exceptional behavior requires exceptional genetics. Grace felt a surge of anger, but held her composure. "Chance isn't just a product of training or genetics," she said, her voice steady. "He's the result of trust, determination, and a bond that can't be measured by charts or the Ories." Doc Lyles murked, clearly unconvinced perhaps, but I remained skeptical that night. Grace sat on her porch replaying the day's events in Herman. She knew she couldn't let the criticism define his legacy, but the doubt planted by Dr. Lyle lingered like a thorn as she watched Chances leaping peacefully at her feet. She made a vow to herself they would rise above the skeptics, not by proving them wrong, but by continuing to do what they did best, helping those in need. Grace woke up the next morning with a renewed sense of purpose. The sting of Dr. Lyall's words lingered, but she reminded herself that her journey with Chance had never been about proving anyone wrong. It was about making a difference. And their next challenge came faster than expected. Early that morning, Chief Daniels called with urgent news. A young boy had gone missing from a nearby campsite, and search efforts had come up empty. The parents were frantic, and the authorities needed every resource they could muster. Grace didn't hesitate. "Chance, and I will be there in 20 minutes, she said, already grabbing her gear when they arrived at the campsite. The tension in the air was palpable. Rangers and volunteers combed the area, their faces setched with worry. The boy, 8-year-old Daniel, had wandered off during the night, and the dense forest made finding him like searching for a needle in a haystack. Grace crouched down beside Chance, holding out a piece of Daniel's sweatshirt. "The parents had provided. This is who we're looking for." "Boys," he said softly, "find him." Chance sniffed the fabric intently, his ears perking up as she caught the scent. Without hesitation, he began moving his nose low to the ground. Grace followed, her heart pounding. With every step, the forest was eerily quiet, the only sounds coming from the rustle of leaves and the distant calls of other searchers. Grace stayed focused, keeping her eyes on Chance as she weaved through the underbrush. Occasionally he would pause, sniffing the air before adjusting his course. An hour passed with no sign of Daniel, and Grace felt the weight of doubt creeping in. She could hear Lyle's voice in her head questioning Chan's abilities, and she pushed the thought away. "Focus," she whispered to herself. Suddenly Chance stopped, his body rigid as she sniffed. Thier let out a sharp bark and took off in a new direction, his tail wagging furiously. Grace's heart leaped. She quickened her pace, following him into a dense thicket. As they broke through the underbrush, Grace spotted a small figure huddled beneath that tree. It was Daniel, his face streaked with tears and his arms wrapped tightly around his knees. He looked up as they approached, his eyes wide with fear and relief. "Daniel," Grace called, dropping to her knees beside him. "You're safe." Now Chance nudged the boy gently, his tail wagging as if to reassure him. Daniel reached out, a trembling hand burying his fingers in Chance's fur. "I was so scared," he whispered. "I thought Noon would find me." Grace wrapped her arms around him, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "You're okay. Now we're taking you home." As they made their way back to the campsite, the sound of cheers and applause greeted them. Daniel's parents ran to meet them, tears streaming down their faces as they embraced their son. Grace stepped back, giving them space while Chance sat calmly by her side, his eyes scanning the crowd as if ensuring everyone was accounted for. Dr. Lyle, who had come to observe the search efforts, stood nearby watching the scene unfold, his skeptical expressions softened as she saw the raw emotion in the parents' faces and the quiet determination in Chance's demeanor. Later, as the crowd dispersed and Grace prepared to leave, Dr. Lyle approached her. His usual arrogance was replaced with something resembling humility. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice quiet. "I doubted what you and Chance could do, but seeing it firsthand, I was wrong." Grace studied him for a moment, then nodded. "It's not about proving anything," she said. "It's about doing the right thing." Dr. Lyle extended a hand, and after a brief pause, Grace shook it. "You've got something special here." head mitted glancing at Chance. Don't let anyone take that away from you. As Grace and Chance drove home, the sun setting behind them, she felt a sense of peace. She hadn't felt in weeks. The day had been exhausting, but it was a reminder of why they did what they did. Good job, buddy, she said, reaching over to scratch. Chance's ears were not done yet. The sun dipped below the horizon, a golden glow over the training grounds as Grace and Chance prepared for the final evaluation after the rescue of Daniel's High. Their reputation had grown, but so had the scrutiny. This was the ultimate test, a high-stake scenario staged by the Academy to evaluate Chance's skills and Grace's leadership. Under pressure, this TUP was daunting, a simulated disaster zone complete with overturned vehicles, hidden victims, and a cacophony of artificial sounds meant to disorient the most experienced teams. The goal was clear: locate and rescue 3 targets within the allotted time, while demonstrating precision and control as they stood at the starting line. Grace knelt beside her, hands steady despite the nervous energy through her. "We've got this, buddy," she said, her voice low but firm, just like we've practiced. Chance looked up at her, his amber eyes shining with trust. They gave a short bark as if to say he was ready. The whistle blew, and they sprang into action. The first challenge was navigating through a maze of debris. Smoke machines obscured their vision, and the sound of sirens blared from hidden speakers. Chance moved swiftly, his nose to the ground, weaving through the chaos with a focus that left the onlookers or struck. Grace followed closely here, scanning for any signs of the first victim search. She commanded her voice cutting through the noise. Chance barked in response, darting toward an overturned barrel. He poured at the ground, then sat his signal that he'd found something. Grace hurried over, using her tools to carefully lift the debris. Beneath it was the first victim, a mannequin fitted with a scent marker to mimic Ariel. Person 1 down, she said into her radio. Moving on, the next area was even more challenging. A steep incline led to a narrow bridge that swayed precariously over a simulated river. Grace hesitated for a split second, but Chance pressed forward, his movements agile and sure-footed. Grace steadied herself and followed, their trust in each other evident in every step off way across the bridge. A loud crash echoed from behind them. Grace turned to see part of the structure collapse, cutting off their retreat. There was no going back, no keep going. Chance urged. On the other side, they entered a dark tunnel. The air was thick, and the sound of dripping water added to the tension. Grace's flashlight flickered as she scanned the walls. "Search," she said. Chance sniffed the air, then darted ahead, his tail wagging as she found the second victim tucked into a hidden alcove. This time it was a live volunteer who smiled as Chance nudged them gently. "Good boy," Grace whispered, her heart swelling with pride. They helped the volunteer to the exit, then raced toward the final area. The clock was ticking, and Grace knew they had to push harder. The last victim was hidden in a pile of rubble at the far end of the course. As they approached, Grace felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, fine, she called, her voice firm. Chance worked methodically, his nose leading him through the debris. Suddenly Woody stopped, his body stiffening as she zeroed in on a specific spot. He barked twice, his tail wagging furiously. Grace dropped to her knees, pulling away the rubble piece by piece. Her hands moved quickly but carefully until she uncovered the final victim, a small mannequin designed to represent a chilled relief washed over. As she radioed the team, all targets found, were bringing them out as they made their way back. The crowd erupted into cheers. Grace felt tears sting her eyes, but she blinked them away, focusing on the task. And then when they crossed the finish line, she knelt beside Chance, wrapping her arms around him. "You did it, boys," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You're amazing." The judges approached, their expressions a mix of admiration and respect. Chief Daniel stepped forward, a rare smile on his face. "Grace, Chance," he said, his voice carrying over the crowd, "you've exceeded every expectation. Your bond, your skill, it's unparalleled." As the crowd applauded, Lyle appeared, his demeanor humbled. "I underestimated you both," admitted Chance. "Is more than just a rescue dog, he's a hero." Grace nodded, her hand resting on Chance's head. "He always has been that night." As they returned home, Grace couldn't help but reflect on their journey from the abandoned puppy. Noon believed into the celebrated hero who saved lives. Chad proved that with love, patience, and belief, anything was possible. "You've changed so many lives," she said softly, looking at them as Cher stood beside her. "But most of all, you've changed mine." As the stars twinkled overhead, Grace knew their story was far from over. This was just the beginning of their legacy, a legacy built on trust, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between a woman and her dog. In the weeks following their triumphant evaluation, Grace and Chance became the talk of the town. Their story spread far beyond the training academy, inspiring countless others to believe in second chances. Local news outlets picked up their tale, highlighting not just Chan's heroic transformation, but also Grace's unwavering commitment to seeing potential where others saw none. One sunny afternoon, Grace found herself sitting on the porch of her Small home acup of tea in hand and Chance lounging at their feet, the bond they shared felt stronger than ever, a quiet, unspoken understanding that needed now words. The mailbox creaked open, and Grace retrieved a stack of letters on and stewed out an envelope with a golden seal from the National Canine Rescue Association. Inside was an invitation to a prestigious award ceremony honoring outstanding contributions to animal rescue and service. Grace smiled as she read the letter aloud to Chance, who perked up at the sound of her voice. "Well, buddy," she said, scratching his ears. "Looks like you're not just my hero, you're everyone's hero." Now the ceremony was held in a grand hall filled with rows of seats and a stage adorned with banners celebrating the achievements of service animals. Grace felt a mix of nerves and pride as she walked up to the podium with Chance by her side. The audience erupted into applause, a standing ovation that brought tears to her eyes. She took a deep